For this video, we're going to be comparing decimals, but instead of just regular decimals this time, we're going to be comparing negative decimals, which tends to be a challenge. So we're going to get some practice. Please take some notes so that you can have that guiding you as you go through. Just like before, anytime we're comparing with decimals, place value is incredibly important. That's going to be our go-to. So we want to look at place value. We also want to think of it in terms of the distance from 0. Because that's going to help us think of how far it is from 0 or any positive numbers. And the closer it is to positive, the greater the value. The farther it is from 0 and negative, the smaller the value. So let's use that to help us as we go through. We're using place value and the distance from 0. If it's closer to 0, meaning closer to the positives, it's going to have a greater value. And if it's farther from 0, it's going to have a smaller value. All of this is for negative numbers, and negative numbers only. So when we look at these two, both numbers are negative. So that's easy for us to see, okay, both negatives. Then we're going to look place value by place value. Both have 1 in the tens place, a 2 in the ones place, so they both start with a negative 12. When we look in the tens place, we have a 2 and a 3. Well, 2 is closer to 0 than 3 is. Because it is closer to 0, meaning closer to the positives, it's going to have a greater value than this. 23 in comparison to 30. Well, 23 is much closer to 0 than 30 is. So because 30 is farther away, it's farther negative, meaning it has a bigger negative value, meaning it's less, making 23 closer to 0, greater value, greater than. So it almost feels backwards or opposite of what we were doing when we were working with positive numbers. If they were both positive, 30 would be greater, but they're not both positive. They're negative, so 23, the 12 and 23 hundredths, negative is going to be greater. Negative 12 and 23 hundredths is greater than negative 12 and 3 tenths or 30 hundredths. Let's try the next one. We have both of them starting with negative 105. So at that point it matches. In the tens place, they both have a 6. But then in the hundredths place, they have a 2 or a 0. In this case, when we're comparing, 0 is closer to 0 because it is 0, where 2 is farther away. So because this is closer to 0, it's going to be closer to positives, making it a greater number. If this one's greater, this one's less. This one's farther from 0, so it has a lesser value, meaning we're going to use the less than symbol. We can also add a digit to compare. And it's like negative 620 and negative 602. Negative 620 is farther from 0, so it has a smaller value, meaning it is less than our other number. If we look at the next one, we have both negative 98,000. Both of them are 765, so both of those place values match. When we get to those decimal place values, that's where it may differ. 0 in the tens place, 1 in the hundredths place. So at this point, they're both the same. When we look at the thousands place, that's when they differ. So when we're comparing them, 1 is farther from 0 than 0 is. So because it's farther from 0, farther negative, it's going to have a smaller value, meaning it is less than our other number. Notice also that this number has 4 digits to the right of the decimal. This one has 3. So if we add another one, we're comparing 110 negative to negative 101. Negative 110 is farther negative. We can think of a number line as well. If 0 were here, we would have smaller negative numbers, and as you go over, bigger negative numbers. So this would be way over here, a big negative number, meaning it's a lesser value, making our statement less than. When we look at these two, both of them are -0, so it's just the decimal part. They both also have 4 digits to the right of the decimal. So once we hit a number other than 0, we can use that. So this one's 560, this one's 559. When we think of 560 and 559, 559 is closer to 0. 560 is farther from 0, but it's also negative. If it's farther negative, that means it has a smaller value, so it is going to be less than our other number. 560 is less than, negative 560 is less than negative 559, so we use the less than symbol to compare the original decimals. Looking at the last one for this example of comparing decimals, both of them are just negative decimals from there. No whole numbers to compare. They both start with 3 zeros to the right of the decimal, tens, hundred, thousands, tens, hundredths, thousands. So at this point we're comparing the 2 and the 6, or the 27, and then we would have to add a 0 to the 6 to make them both have 5 digits to the right of the decimal. So then we're comparing a -27 and a -60. When we compare them, -27 is closer to 0, meaning it's also closer to those positive numbers, meaning it would have a greater value than a number farther from 0. When we compare them and order them with multiple, we're going to use the same process. First, we're going to start by making them have the same number of digits to the right of the decimal. This one has 4. This one has 3, so we need to add a 0. And this one also has 3, so we're going to add a 0. We want to look at the digits from left to right once they are no longer 0. The 7s, they all match. So this one is like -63. This one is -110. And this one is -800. When we're looking at these three, -800 is way farther from 0. It is the farthest from 0, and because of that, it has the smallest value. So we want to list that one first. The original form, -7 and 80 thousandths. And we'll write it the way it was given to us. So we've taken care of that one. That one's going to be less than anything else. Now when we're comparing these two, the next smallest number is going to be the next one farthest from 0. Well, 110 is farther from 0 than 63, so this is our middle number. -7 and 11 thousandths is less than, because 63 is the closest to 0. It's also the closest to the positive number, so it's going to have the greatest value. So -7 and 63 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. So -7 and 63 10 thousandths is the greatest value, and we want to write them how they were originally given to us. So that's our answer. One final problem. If we look at place value again, all of them start with 12, -12. So we're going to look at the tenths place, the next place value over. And when we do that, 2 of them match. And one of them is a bigger number, meaning it's a bigger negative number. It's bigger, it's farther from 0. More negative means it's a lesser value, farther from 0. So that's going to be the smallest one. Or the least. That's less than. Now when we compare the next two, they were matching, so we need to go to the next place value over. One's a 5, one's a 6. Again, they're both negatives. 6 is farther from 0 than 5, and because it's farther negative, it has a lesser value, so that one's our next smallest. And because this 5 is the closest to 0, it is going to be the greatest value. So that is the last one that we list. When we are comparing and ordering decimals, we always want to look at the place value and think of it in terms of how far it is from 0 or positive numbers when they are both negative digits. The farther a number is from 0, the farther negative, the smaller the value is overall. So you want to keep that in mind.